Oi, my name is Tony. The Sweeney was a popular ITV cop crime show action drama, starring John Thor and Dennis Waterman as flying squad officers Inspector Jack Regan and Sergeant George Carter. The title derives from Cockney rhyming slang, Sweeney Todd Flying Squad, hence the Sweeney. Congenital idiots wondered why there was no one in it called Sweeney, or alternatively they thought that Jack Regan's actual name was Sweeney. Here, look, it's Sweeney. And why? Because they were idiots. The rest of us with half a brain or more knew the score. It was one of the first major TV shows to portray police officers as a lot less genial and cosy than they'd been previously established in long-running shows like Dixon of Dock Green or Z-Cars. These cops were tough, aggressive, violent, hard-drinking, chain-smoking, women-chasing roughnecks. Every bit as dangerous, ruthless and fallible as the hardened criminals they pursued. They bent the law out of shape, manipulated witnesses and suspects, and generally caused havoc with shooters and motorcars in and around London. Regan and Carter had certain standards and a moral code though. They didn't take bribes, hated bent coppers, and wouldn't force their attentions on a lady unless she showed a flicker of interest or at least nodded something approaching consent. I loved that show, the car chases, the punch-ups, the gunplay, great after the watershed entertainment. It pulled some adverse criticism for its crunching brutality, colourful terminology and scant regard for people and property, collateral damage a lot of the time. Still, it was rough, punchy, fast-paced, and for the most part very well written, with some killer dialogue and quotable one-liners flying around. Today it all looks macho tame and almost quaint, outdated, but at the time it was dynamite. It was popular too, did I mention that? So much so that it transitioned from the small screen to the big screen as 2 feature-length movies. Sweeney! Complete with exclamation mark in 1977, and Sweeney 2 in 1978, no exclamation mark. It got a remake in 2012 as The Sweeney, a film starring Ray Winston as Regan and Ben Drew as Carter. I'm not going to spend any time on that one here, maybe later as a separate entity. No, here I'm going to do another of my occasional double bill thangs, because the notion of the 2 original films as a double bill seems a natural and organic way to address them. In the UK, they might have done the rounds together once or twice as a fetching little pair, and within that lovely 70s run of Brit gangster crime flicks, they do fit quite fittingly into that pantheon, alongside the likes of Villain, Sitting Target, Get Carter, The Squeeze and The Long Good Friday. Now I've reviewed all of those, so it only seems fair that upon sourcing the Blu-ray remasters of both Sweeney films, I pay them some attention. So here we are, and here we go. Sweeney, complete with exclamation mark, kicks off with a deliberate fatal overdosing of upmarket call girl Janice Linda Bellingham in a swanky hotel room. The murder is presided over by Johnson, Michael Coles, his thuggish male associate, and a middle-aged lady who looks like a less fierce version of Rosa Klebb. Before the overdose, they ply the girl with drink and coerce her into recording a message to a person who turns out to be Charles Baker MP Ian Bannon. Baker is the Secretary of State for Energy. He's an alcoholic who's been seeing Janice on the side. Once she's killed, Janice is stripped naked and dumped on the hotel bed. Baker is about to make a lucrative deal with OPEC to stabilise the world oil market and enhance Britain's position within it. He's tipped to be the next Prime Minister, which might have seemed unlikely at the time. A boozy, narcissistic, oversexed liability getting the top job. But if you look at what we've got today, I'd say he was a stellar candidate, might even have got my vote. The situation has been orchestrated by Baker's American Press Secretary McQueen, Barry Foster, to increase his influence and leverage over his unsuspecting employer. McQueen has a bunch of murderous guns for hire on the payroll led by Johnson, and they're none too shy in how they go about their business. So, potential scandal then. Dead junkie sex worker in hotel room implicating government minister on tape in her suicide. Baker is distraught, but McQueen assures he can clean it up and make it go away. Here's Janice's body removed to to her flat and it's made to look like she accidentally OD'd there. He keeps hold of the tape though. But the best laid plans and all that. Who could have foreseen the involvement of two wild cards in the form of Detective Inspector Jack Regan, John Thor, and his Detective Sergeant George Carter, Dennis Waterman of the Flying Squad. Regan and Carter lead an assault on a gang of criminals out to take down an armoured van full of loot. It's a case of pickaxe handles at dawn, violent beatings, and many a black eye, split lip and fractured bone. Once this gentlemanly ruckus is over, Regan gets a call from his informant, mid-level gangland figure Ronnie Brent, Joe Mellier. Ronnie gave Regan the tip-off on the wages blag and wants a favour in return. Baker wasn't the only one in a relationship with Janice. Seems Ronnie was something of a regular. He's just come from the coroner's court and he knows that something fishy is going down, because at the time Janice was supposed to have OD'd in her flat, Ronnie was there, and she wasn't. She was somewhere else. Obvious conclusion. Initially reluctant to get involved, Jack feels he owes his informant something like the time of day and begins to investigate the case. He starts to have suspicions, which are confirmed when Ronnie and his men are found machine-gunned to death at Ronnie's scrapyard. Just before this, Ronnie had been harassing Janice's flatmate, Bianca Diane Keane, another high-class sex worker being pimped to politicians and other dignitaries by McQueen. Now he's been executed, as Carter remarks on seeing the bullet holes with 9-inch nails. Regan finds that both Janice and Bianca are registered as employees of McQueen's office. He begins to see links and starts asking some awkward questions. McQueen has Regan picked up by two bogus cops working with Johnson. He's abducted and force-fed a bottle of whiskey, then put behind the wheel of his car. His subsequent car crash and drunk driving charge sees him suspended from duty. This doesn't deter Regan, just increases his determination to get to the bottom of it all. When McQueen arranges for Regan to interview Bianca in a hotel room, he also sends Johnson and his goons there to eliminate them both. They narrowly escape in a hair-raising chase through the streets of London. With Regan and Bianca on the run, but supported by Carter, will any of them live long enough to crack the case and see justice served? Sweeney, complete with exclamation mark, flexes its muscles far more in the less restrictive world of adult cinema than it was able to do on the TV screen. The violence is more explicit, more detailed, and there are added instances of nudity. It's flavoured with something of the acute tincture of Brit exploitation cinema. The production values are higher though, and the remastered Blu-ray is a very professionally upscaled article, I must say. It was shot quickly and cheaply, using many of the same cast and crew from the TV series, and was scripted by Ranald Graham, who had penned some of the episodes of the show. The director, David Wicks, was responsible for 6 episodes of the series, so knew the subject matter and the characters well. Big screen adaptations of television shows often lose something in translation from the small screen. Sweeney manages to maintain the feel of the series, and this is mostly down to the familiar faces, and Thor and Waterman sticking close to their original characterizations. The relationship between the two men was always one of friendship and mutual respect, but was never plain sailing. They bickered, argued, shouted at each other, interacted abrasively and often confrontationally, like warring siblings rather than cheery best mates. Yet they always had each other's backs, even if sorry seemed to be the hardest word. So hard it almost killed either man to say it out loud. The occasional uneasy alliance that existed between the cops and certain villains or faces was another aspect that travelled intact, and the dialogue, peppered with aphorisms like "you're nicked" and "God almighty," were immediately familiar to fans. So the film, which I liked and enjoyed, was a fair old financial hit. But yeah, you know there's always going to be a but. Only this one isn't Oprah or Kardashian sized, more in the Kylie Minogue ballpark. At heart, it's a TV episode stretched to feature length. To inform and pad it out, it steals bits and pieces from other Brit gangster flicks, most notably Get Carter. There's a more graphic retread of someone being force-fed whiskey and put behind the wheel of a car, the deliberate overdose of a sex worker, and Regan replicating Jack Carter's nude scene in full view of a shocked elderly female neighbour. The plot draws on the real-world 60s political scandal of the Profumo affair. Cabinet ministers and court call girls, and it doesn't feel quite dynamic or meaty enough. Old hat and a bit dusty by then. Plus the decision to make Barry Foster's character American seems a trifle odd. What's wrong with good old slimy Brit spin doctor types a la Alistair Campbell? Now there's one evil twat for you. Sexed up the weapons of mass destruction, war in Iraq dossier, and possibly drove an innocent, decent, honest man to suicide as a bonus. Yeah, I know he hadn't come to prominence in the 70s, but his type of sleazy political puppeteer was about the place all the same. The action scenes are fast and punchy throughout, with Johnson and his team of hitters blithely careering around London, shooting the place up, knocking off random patrolling bobbies with headshots, crashing their vehicles into the scenery and blowing up political journalist Frank Chadwick, Colin Welland. I know they didn't have the insane proliferation of CCTV cameras we have today, but these guys do nothing to conceal their identities or what they're about. It's as if stealth, the word and concept, has no meaning to them whatsoever. The ending would be a slick, satisfying payoff, if only it wasn't for, well, I'll get to that.
Spoiler now!
Regan has been reinstated after his superiors suddenly woke up one morning to take notice of the mayhem going on around them. I say, what's all this? And decided McQueen is the dastardly dick at the root of it all. So another dodgy politician thanks Regan for his efforts and lets slip that McQueen won't be arrested but deported. If he were to be arrested, the belief is his paymasters will seek to silence him, and the powers that be don't want that to happen on British soil. Now, apart from the fact the UK couldn't deport Adolf fucking Hitler if they had him in custody, so ineffectual is the legal system regarding getting rid of unwanted human shit, this doesn't seem fair to Regan. He and Carter turn up at McQueen's deportation point where Regan has wangled a warrant for his arrest. When he serves it in full view of all, McQueen panics and runs for it. Johnson, sniping from a black car with a high-powered rifle, blows him away. Yay! Only Carter, after rushing to McQueen's corpse, turns to Regan and shouts accusingly,
"They didn't kill him! You did!"
Yeah, so what? That outburst is not in keeping with Carter's established character and generally unswerving loyalty to his superior officer. Now, if he'd said, "Well played, Gov, he got what he deserved," then that would have been fine. As it is, it jars very badly with the spirit of the thing and ruins what could have been a decent finish. Why they did it is anyone's guess, but for me, it casts something of a shadow on an otherwise competent and amusing Brit crime thriller. It's well acted, great supporting cast, Bannon, Foster, Keane, Welland. There are some very tasty London locations. Plus, nice to see Michael Cole's Inspector Murray in Dracula AD 72 and the Satanic Rites of Dracula on the other side of the law as the jovially murderous Johnson. Although I did miss the presence of the original theme tune composed by jazzman Harry South, Dennis King's score is a catchy little workout. Considering its relative success, surely we could expect more of the same. I sort of hope for a resurrection of the TV series for another season, but no, instead, a year later, we got the rather unimaginatively titled Sweeney 2. No exclamation mark this time. Sweeney 2 toned down the violence a notch, retained and increased the nudity, made the language a bit saltier. This one was directed by Tom Clegg, a veteran of the series. It was scripted by Ian Kennedy Martin, the creator of the series, and his brother, Troy Kennedy Martin, who had previously written the screenplays for the original Italian Job and Clint Eastwood's Kelly's Heroes. With those components, one might expect something special. Temper that thought would be my advice. Sweeney 2 begins with Jack Regan refusing to testify on behalf of his boss, Detective Chief Superintendent Jupp Denham Elliott. Jupp is going down on corruption charges, and Regan is no friend of bent coppers. Before he's sentenced, he asks Jack to take over one of his ongoing cases that he just couldn't crack. A firm of heisters hit banks and armoured vans at random in the London area. They're organised, violent, use firearms, and are as ruthless towards the public as they are towards their own gang members. Any one of their number who falls behind or might get arrested is killed to prevent them talking. Once the job is done, it's radio silence. They melt away like ghosts, drop off the radar until the next one. They are both a danger and a menace to the public and need to be stopped. One of the gang's quirks is taking exactly £60,000 from each robbery, leaving behind any cash more than that sum in their abandoned getaway car. From the time of the Great Train Robbery in Britain in 1963, it became something of a trope in both reality and fiction for UK UK criminals to flee abroad to Spain or Brazil to live the high life on their ill-gotten gains. This gang of expats are hanging out with their wives and children in a luxury private resort on the island of Malta. The resort is owned by them and under continuous development. They've made it their home and, led by Hill, Ken Hutchison, live there as one big dysfunctional family. The proceeds from each blag goes to fund their lifestyle. The swimming pool needs a repair, they do a job to pay for it. Another wing needs building, they do another job. They are in and out of Britain pulling heists. When George Carter leads a team to apprehend the gang, it ends in disaster with several members of the public and police officers killed and numerous injured.
I've never seen so many dead people.
Regan comments, then becomes determined to take them down. The basis is solid, and with the right focus on the right things could have really sparked the target. The conflict of a heist team pitted against the Sweeney would have made for a good 45-50 minute teleplay. Problem is, it needed to be feature film length, and the writers seem to be at something of a loss regarding how to expand it. Therefore, we get an unconnected and overlong interlude involving a bomb in a London hotel being defused by a CIA agent. What? During which police and bomb squad officers proceed to get pissed in the hotel bar, whilst Carter, disguised as a hotel employee, assists the agent. What has this got to do with anything? What was the point? Then Regan and Carter take an unofficial and unsanctioned flight to Malta. They get zero cooperation from the Maltese police, understandably enough, visit the gang's resort to find they're not at home, then fly straight back again. What the hell was that all about? What was it supposed to achieve? Then there's Anna Nye as Shirley, a neo-Nazi dominatrix type with links to Hill. At a team briefing, Regan screens a pornographic car advert she appeared in, purely for the purposes of titillation and to up the nudity content, I assume. I'm not complaining about that, except it feels like more filler and it doesn't serve any narrative purpose, other than to give the lads a show and reinforce how, well, laddish they are. Sweeney too is inconsistent, choppy, and frequently irrational to a distracting degree, perplexing and messy, like it's been stitched together from jigsaw pieces of ideas that were once considered for inclusion in one of the TV scripts. The Thor-Waterman-Regan-Carter relationship is intact, and their interplay remains a good reason for watching, but the script is fractured and slack where it needs to be sharp and tight. There's a good old bloodbath at the end though.
Spoiler time!
Regan, Carter and their crew have frustrated the heisters' plans and have discovered the survivors are laying low at Shirley's place. When they storm the terraced house, Hill, who is having an affair with Shirley, blames her for giving away their presents and blasts her to death with a gold-plated Purdy shotgun before blowing off his own head just as Regan breaches the bedroom, leaving the detective with gore spattered on his face. The last robber is gunned down in the street. Back in Malta, the wives, who always looked thoroughly miserable and dejected at living in the lap of luxury, listen to the reading of the joint will of their dead husbands. The property and all assets have been left to them in the hope they will continue to live there and extend the place as a tribute to what their men had achieved. They unanimously elect to sell it. Ungrateful cows. No pleasing some people. The film ends with Regan, Carter and their team boozing it up, womanizing and dancing in a raucous London pub in celebration of cracking the case. That's the last time we would see them on screen. There were no further films or TV episodes. John Thor went on to award-winning and acclaimed roles in the TV series Kavanagh QC and Inspector Morse. Waterman scored a long-running hit with the crime comedy drama Minder and the equally long-running cold case procedural New Tricks. But for me, they will always be most fondly remembered as Regan and Carter in The Sweeney. The show was groundbreaking and their participation in it essential to its success. For fans, the two films are must-see items. I really like the first, less sold on the second, but together they make for a splendid evening of nostalgic entertainment. Appreciation is likely enhanced if you are an aficionado of the series, but for anyone who gets a kick out of tough British gangland action drama movies, you could do far worse. Wonderfully politically incorrect, lovingly brutal, delightfully masculine. What's not to like? Grateful thanks for your time and attention. Please feel free to do whatever you choose to do next. Hit like, don't like, comment, subscribe, check out my early access Patreon thing, or even make a welcome financial contribution via the thanks button. I shall return with something else in the very near future. That's the plan at any rate. Until then, mind how you go, and don't get nicked.
Who are you?
We're the Sweeney, son, and we haven't had any dinner. You've kept us waiting, so unless you want a kicking, you tell us where those photographs are.